Hare Krishna. So should we get started or do we want to wait for 2-3 more minutes, Mataji, Vinita?
Mataji will start, Mataji. It is, the devotees will join.
Okay. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We are resuming our series on the chapter-wise summaries of Srimad Bhagavatam. So today we have His Grace Vamsi Vadana Prabhu. Vamsi Vadana Prabhu is a disciple of Srila Radhanath Swami Maharaj. He was introduced to Krishna consciousness in 2015 in Cincinnati, Ohio. His family was blessed with the association of many visiting senior brahmacharis and grastha devotees, and by their causeless mercy, their family was transferred to Baltimore in 2016. Since then, both Prabhuji and his wife and daughter have been serving ISKCON Baltimore Temple and the devotee congregation. And for the regular Bhakti Sangha attendees, his wife, Vrinda Kumari Mataji, is also one of the very popular teachers on the Govinda Club for the kids. Prabhuji, you can now take over the call. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for being there with us and doing this very wonderful service consistently. Prabhuji will be speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam canto 2, chapter 4. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. You can now take over the call.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Priti Vilasini Mataji, for encouraging all the devotees to actually regularly study Srila Prabhupada's books. Otherwise, it is very easy to get distracted. Thank you. So, before we begin discussing chapter 4, we will offer Mangalacharan prayers, praying to our spiritual masters, both current and our previous acharyas, invoking blessings, so that we can assimilate whatever we are going to simply read or repeat from our acharya's books. Om Ajnanathmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuda Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamsha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyatyade Satarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Let me share my screen. Okay. So today we'll be continuing from Canto 2, and today's topic or the chapter that we'll be discussing is chapter 4, the process of creation. So before we begin, just a quick recap. By last chapter was done by His Grace Balram Shakti Prabhuji. He's very worshipable to many of us, inspiring so many devotees with many of his classes. So Prabhuji explained the last chapter, chapter 3 was a pure devotional service, change in heart. So this chapter is a very powerful chapter, especially for practicing devotees. Explained about Srila Sukadeva Goswami answers Parikshit Maharaj's question of what is the duty of a man who is about to die. And Srila Sukadeva Goswami, after explaining all the different types and means to achieve mukti and the gradual process of mukti through the process of yoga. He begins this chapter by first mentioning, oh, okay, there are different people trying different means of liberation. And those are maybe some kind of sect of people who are intelligent. But what to speak of people who are not intelligent, who are not endeavoring for liberation? What do they do? And exactly similar question, if you see a parallel, Arjuna asked similar questions to Lord Shri Krishna in the 7th chapter. An exact theme is being explained by Lord Shri Krishna in the 7th chapter of the Gita too. And this first 9 verses of the 3rd chapter of the 2nd canto talks about demigod worship. Kamaistastir hita jnana prapadyante anya devata. So people who have less intelligence worship demigods. And why less intelligent? Because they worship for things that are temporary in nature. Say, for example, somebody who's very good at studies, would like to prosper very much in studies, get PhD degree and so many multiple masters and PhD degrees. They may worship Lord Shiva. And there is a list of demigods mentioned by Srila Sukadeva Goswami. Say, for example, somebody wants to have a good marital relationship or good wife or husband, they worship goddess Durga or slash Uma. So that is being mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. But then in the 10th verse, Srila Sukadeva Goswami mentions he doesn't deride the people who are actually worshipping demigods. So we should, once I was hearing from a class, why does Srila Sukadeva Goswami talk about all these things, about different forms of yoga, demigod worship? Why not directly to bhakti, right? It's a very interesting thing, because when we hear the first chapter, Srila Narad Muni asked Srila Vyasadeva to directly write and glorify about Lord Sri Krishna. And he could have directly started with Lord Krishna's pastimes. Why all this explanation? Why Srila Sukadeva Goswami has to explain all these things? It is explained that when Srila Sukadeva Goswami was about to speak to Maharaj Parikshit, and Maharaj Parikshit came and he was meditating on the bank of river Yamuna, there were many sages from all over the universe who came to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. And our acharyas explained that not everyone was inclined towards bhakti. So this might be the case when we are trying to repeat the words of our acharyas to people who are getting into Krishna consciousness. Not everyone may be inclined directly to bhakti. So we need to learn from our acharyas and repeat what our acharyas are saying according to time, place, and circumstance. So Srila Sukadeva Goswami is actually doing the same thing. He is explaining that in the 10th verse of the 3rd chapter, that akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Doesn't matter whether you are akama, sarva kama, moksha kama, whether you have full of material desires, no desires, you are desiring for liberation, doesn't matter. Worship tivra, with tivra bhakti, worship the Supreme Lord. We see in the life of Dhruva Maharaj, he had a lot of material desires. But still, because his mother, as a guru, asked him to go and worship Lord Vishnu in the forest, he went and worshipped Lord Vishnu, and everyone knows what happened to him. And then in the 11th verse, it explained that, okay, how does demigod worshippers also get bhakti, pure bhakti? Is it by the mercy of the demigods? And Srila Sukadeva Goswami mentions that no, it is not by the mercy of the demigods. It is only and only by the mercy of a pure devotee that a person can be inclined towards bhakti. We often have this understanding that it is by the mercy of the demigods that actually we get into the path of unalloyed. At least we may not be on the platform, at least we have the access for unalloyed pure devotional service. But Srila Sukadeva Goswami mentions that it is only by the mercy of pure devotees that there may be pure devotees among demigods too, right? So we cannot just say that, oh, demigods are good for nothing. That is actually an offense according to the nectar of devotion. We should respect the demigods. There may be demigods who are pure devotees too, like Lord Shiva. he instructed the prachetas. So similarly, only by association of such pure devotees, Tivra Bhakti can actually be accessed. Whether we are practicing is the next question, but at least the access to pure Bhakti is only possible with pure devotees. And then it is explained that Lord is explained as Kaivalya Panta. And we can understand about the Lord only through the process of Shravanam. It begins with hearing. And hearing on the topics that is related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, natural consequence of such hearing is attainment of transcendental knowledge, which causes detachment from mundane topics. So this is the effect of hearing Harikatha, right? Knowledge and detachment comes naturally. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chad Yat Ahitukam. Ahituki Bhakti automatically comes by hearing in the association of pure devotees. And then in the later verses, Shaunagadi Rishi, he inspires Sutta Goswami to speak more. And he mentions that you speak more about Maharaj Parikshit than Srila Sukadeva Goswami. And then he describes who Maharaj Parikshit was. He was such a great devotee when he was child, and Srila Sukadeva Goswami was an exalted devotee even when he was in his father's womb. And then in the 17th verse, this famous verse, the last few verses are very powerful of the 3rd chapter. And in the 17th verse, it explains that Ayurharati Vaipumsam Yat Udnan, forgot the verse, by the rising and setting of the sun, Uttama Shloka Vartaya. By the rising and setting of the sun, everyone is getting closer towards death. But for a devotee, it's one step closer towards transcendence or Krishna. So we should always, Prabhupada said, Satatam Kirtayantam. We should strive for that. Even if we are not able to, we should strive for that platform of Satatam Kirtayantam. Always strive for remembering Krishna somehow or the other. Right? Prabhupada mentions very potent. Every word, every sentence of Prabhupada's purport are so illuminating. Prabhupada says, as a highly potent drug injected intravenously acts at once on the whole body, the transcendental topics of the Lord injected through the ear by the pure devotee of the Lord can act very efficiently. Oral realization of the transcendental messages implies total realization. So just like how if somebody is not well, they inject a drug into a person's body, it acts. So similarly, the oral receptions of Harikatha coming through the ears from a transparent via medium of a bona fide representative coming in disciplic succession, it acts very efficiently, Prabhupada says. And that is what Srila Saunakadi Rishi is actually inquiring from Sutta Goswami. Similarly, Parikshit Maharaj is inquiring from Sukadeva Goswami. Non-different. Same effect is happening. Excuse me. And in the later verses, like I said, it gets much more stronger and stronger and stronger as we go towards the end of the 3rd chapter. The next few verses mentions that one who hasn't heard or listened to the messages about the acts of the Lord, not sung or chanted loudly the songs of the Lord, is considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes. Prabhupada mentions that in the impure state of a living being, the various senses are fully engaged in mundane affairs. If the ear is not engaged in the service of the Lord by hearing about Him from Srimad Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, certainly the holes of the ear will be filled with some rubbish. A disciple of Srila Prabhupada, he says that there are only two states. Either we are Krishna conscious or we are Maya conscious. There is no in between. It is not like, oh, I'm there in between. I'm thinking whether to be Krishna conscious or Maya conscious. No. Either we are Krishna conscious or we are Maya conscious. Exactly this is what Prabhupada is saying. If we don't fill our ears with Harikatha or Hari Kirtan, our senses will naturally go towards the things of this world to satisfy our own senses. Therefore, the messages of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam should be preached all over the world very loudly, Prabhupada says, very loudly. Prabhupada doesn't say gently. Prabhupada's movement, I was hearing recently from a preacher, very worshipable preacher, he was mentioning that even Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they honor Prabhupada so much so because all of the disciples, grand disciples, great-grand disciples of Prabhupada have a lot of, they treat Prabhupada like a very exalted personality. They have so much reverence for Prabhupada because Prabhupada's mood of giving Krishna consciousness to whomever they meet, he preached by his example, and all of his disciples, great-grand disciples, everyone are following in his footsteps. Right? Whenever they get a chance, they mention something about Krishna so that people get benefited. Everyone. That's how I got benefited. Somebody pulled me in, right? So we should be grateful for so many people who have come in our lives, who have boldly preached about Krishna to us at some time in our life. And then in the last verse, Prabhupada also mentions that Srila Sukadeva Goswami or Srila Sutta Goswami again repeats. He mentions that the heart is steel framed. In fact, Srila Saunakadi Rishi mentions, heart is steel framed. If the holy names are chanted for a long time and we don't shed tears, or our hairs don't stand on end, or if we don't develop feelings for the Supreme Lord or his devotees. It is a very powerful verse to be read repeatedly again and again, at least for practicing sadhaka like myself. Prabhupada mentions that if you don't develop attraction or if you don't develop any feeling towards the Supreme Lord, even after chanting the holy name for some time, then it is only due to offenses. The 10 offenses to the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. And Prabhupada mentions that only by getting in touch with a pure devotee of the Lord, we can rectify all such bad habits. Otherwise, we may be able to imitate, say, some purified devotees who are chanting constantly. We may be able to hold a bead bag in our hands and pretend to be chanting constantly. But Prabhupada is mentioning that that is not the way. The way is to get trained under a bona fide pure devotee of the Lord and learn how to chant the holy name, and then naturally, over a period of time, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, we hope to chant constantly with feeling. And that's where the 3rd chapter ends, and we will begin the 4th chapter. So the 4th chapter explains about the process of creation. And I'd like to sincerely thank His Grace Gaurang Darshan Prabhu. His Bhagavad Subodhini is so much useful, and it's such a blessing for all the practicing sadhakas to systematically study Srimad Bhagavatam. And he has provided such wonderful notes and link between verses and Acharya's perspectives. It is such a treasure for all the practicing devotees. So the contents are the first few verses. Srila Sutta Goswami describes what happens next, and then Parikshit Maharaj's questions, and then before Srila Sukadeva Goswami answers Parikshit Maharaj's question in the next chapter of the 5th chapter, Srila Sukadeva Goswami offers prayers to the Supreme Lord. So Srila Sutta Goswami describes what happens next. Now, after hearing all this, Parikshit Maharaj, he's in rapt attention on Krishna, and he has detached himself from all material things. How? He's been hearing to Sri Parikshit Maharaj, Sri Sukadeva Goswami, and he's able to focus his mind on Krishna only after hearing from Srila Sukadeva Goswami. It is a very interesting aspect, because We cannot artificially focus our mind on Krishna. Right? By practice and detachment, Sri Krishna says, because after Arjuna says to focus our mind, it's so difficult. I mean, the mind gets disturbed very easily. It's like the raging wind, right? When a hurricane comes in a place, the most powerful country in the world, even they can't do anything when natural disasters come. All they can say is, take whatever you can and get out. That is the power of the wind. And Arjuna says, mind is even more powerful than the wind. So we cannot even fathom how powerful is our mind. We realize it only when taking the japa beads and chanting in the morning time. How powerful is our mind? But Parikshit Maharaj is giving us a hint how to get the mind back on track. After perfectly hearing from Srila Sukadeva Goswami. Prabhupada writes in the purport that to become a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, two essential things are needed. Either we should be born in a family of devotees, and we should take shelter and blessings of a bona fide spiritual master. So it's very interesting. I'm not born in a devotee's family. So what is our position? But Prabhupada has given us that blessing, right? Once Srila Prabhupada's disciples asked, Prabhupada, you have given so much to us. What is our qualification? Srila Prabhupada mentioned, you have no qualification. I made your qualification. This is our qualification, that to be in the family of Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. ISKCON family is non-different being born in a family. In fact, after taking shelter and initiation from a bona fide spiritual master in Parampara, it is explained that we are actually getting second birth. So we are actually born in a family of devotees. Our actual birth, our actual bhakti begins when we take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. And after doing this, by hearing from such a bona fide spiritual master, we will be able to concentrate our chaste mind further upon Lord Krishna. Prabhupada mentions in the purport. This is the way our acharyas are saying that we can focus our mind. And then in the next verse, Parikshit Maharaj completely detaches himself. He was the emperor of the entire world. And this verse is very famous. Atmajaya sutagara pashu dravina bandushu raje chavikale nityam viruddham mamatam jaho. So Parikshit Maharaj was able to give up all deep-rooted affection for his body, wife, family, sons, all his animals, wealth, friends, and kingdom. I mean, how was he able to do this? Detachment. If he tried to artificially imitate Maharaj Parikshit, we are doomed. We are literally doomed. I heard once from a brahmachari, I think I've mentioned this here or probably to some of our friends here, that there was a devotee, I wouldn't name the congregation or anywhere in some part of the world. They all went for a yatra to Vrindavan. And after he went to yatra in Vrindavan, he didn't want to come back. And all the devotees came back and they didn't find this person. And somehow they got his number and they called him and, what are you doing? Where are you? He said, I've come to Vrindavan. I don't want to leave Vrindavan. And he was fairly new. And these senior devotees, they asked him, are you really sure? Have you read Srila Prabhupada's books? What he says? Yes, I've read everything and I don't want to leave Vrindavan. I want to stay here, chant all day and be in Vrindavan always. And then the devotees tried convincing him so much, but he never came back. And communication was lost several months. And after several months, it was understood that that devotee actually completely lost his mind. He was not normal anymore. And this devotee was mentioning that the devotee who stayed in Vrindavan prematurely, without much guidance, it is mentioned that even if we aspire to stay in Vrindavan, we need proper guidance. Otherwise, we can be misled totally. Because Maya is so strong. And this devotee completely lost his mind and mentioned that it took almost a couple of years for doctors and everyone to bring him back to normal life again. So we shouldn't imitate great souls, right? Srila Raghunath Das Goswami was so austere. One Acharya of Srila Prabhupada, he mentions that if we try to imitate Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, we will die. All we have to do is take the principle of such great acharyas. And what is the principle? Prabhupada helps us. He says that one who has seriously heard Srimad Bhagavatam even for one day, not 5 days, 10 days, 1 day, 1 month, 1 year, one day, like Maharaj Parikshit, from a fit personality like Srila Sukadeva Goswami, he may be able to lose all affinity for material things. One day, if we can hear Srimad Bhagavatam with rapt attention, thinking that if I don't hear Srimad Bhagavatam, just like Maharaj Parikshit, with nothing else coming in our mind, from a personality like Srila Sukadeva Goswami, and Prabhupada says, we may be able to detach ourselves from this world within our heart, not externally. Again, our acharyas explain that be in this world and of this world. That is not possible by our mundane intelligence. It is possible only, like Prabhupada is mentioning here, if we can hear one day from a personality like Srila Sukadeva Goswami with utmost rapt attention. And then by such hearing process, determination comes. And he was a king. We can't even imagine. He was a king with all kinds of responsibilities, renouncing everything from dharma, artha, kama, everything. He was actually educating and making people follow some process, at least some karma kandiya process, because in this age of Kali, even karma kanda is not even followed. Such a king was able to come to a point of fixed attention towards Krishna. And where did this determination come from? Again, our acharyas explain this determination of Vyavasayatmika Buddhi Ekeha Kurunandana, one-pointed attention in the process of bhakti towards Brajendranandan Krishna is possible only when we adhere to the instructions of a bona fide spiritual master. And this is exactly what happened to Maharaj Parikshit here, right? If we recall, Maharaj Parikshit was actually cursed to die in 7 days. We can't even imagine the trauma that we will be in if we were told that we have only 7 days to live on this planet. But he was able to fix his mind with determination on hearing Harikatha, because it was the Harikatha emanating from a pure devotee like Srila Sukadeva Goswami. And then Maharaj Parikshit's questions now. Now Maharaj Parikshit is first glorifying Srila Sukadeva Goswami. This is very interesting. In some portion of Srila Prabhupada's purport, Prabhupada writes in the purport that whenever we meet an exalted personality, it can be a senior devotee too, that we should not artificially boast what we are doing first to them. Say, for example, we even don't know them personally. We should first at least try to introduce ourselves, what is our name, and then we should ask them. And we should glorify them first, not glorify ourselves first. If we know that person, we should glorify that person first. Whenever we meet them, not glorify ourselves. Oh, I'm doing so much here. I'm doing so many services here. Blah blah blah. Whatnot. Right? That is what a conditioned soul like myself will do. But here we can learn from Parikshit Maharaj what Parikshit Maharaj is doing. He's saying he's glorifying Srila Sukadeva Goswami first before even asking questions. He's saying your Harikatha is dispelling my ignorance because you are the knower of everything and you are sinless. Maharaj Parikshit is glorifying Srila Sukadeva Goswami. And this is the effect of hearing
from a pure devotee, and Srila Prabhupada is saying practical experience of Maharaj Parikshit is disclosed here, revealing that transcendental topics of the Lord act like injections when received by the sincere devotee from a person who is perfectly uncontaminated by material tinges. This is the effect of hearing from a pure soul. And Prabhupada also mentions the crucial test of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is one should get positive enlightenment by such act. So it is not like, oh, I've done my stuff, I've heard Srimad Bhagavatam, I'm good to go to work now. No. When we hear Srimad Bhagavatam, just like Prabhupada is mentioning in the prior line, just like when we take sumptuous prasadam, nobody has to come and ask, Prabhu, are you full? Are you done? Do you need some more? No. Right? Srimad Bhagavatam gives this analogy in the later cantos. Just like how somebody is fully satisfied, we don't have to ask that person whether that person has had sufficient prasadam or not. Similarly, when this is the test of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, that one has to have enlightenment. Maharaj Parikshit is saying, my ignorance is dispelled. Our false ego should get cracked, at least for that moment of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from a pure soul. We will have no place to run when we are hearing from a pure soul, because we are cornered. And that is what experience, Maharaj Parikshit is revealing his experience, that when he heard from Srila Sukadeva Goswami, his ignorance was destroyed, this dispelled. And then in the 6th to 9th verses, before he talks, now the linkage Gaurang Darshan Prabhuji is mentioning is, I should hear and chant Krishna's qualities, forms and pastimes, but first I shall ask about the Lord's pastimes of creation by his Maya Shakti. Then I will ask about his pastimes such as lifting of Govardhan and Hill, Chit Shakti or Hiladini Shakti. So Maharaj Parikshit is first asking questions about the Lord's creative energy before going into Vrindavan pastimes. And Srila Prabhupada writes that so a neophyte devotee should not jump directly into the 10th canto, into discussing about the pastimes of Lord Krishna and Vrindavan. So we should gradually understand. From Prabhupada says that in Chaitanya Charitamrita it is warned that neophyte devotees should be on guard against pitfall, because one should know about Krishna's greatness first before understanding about Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes. It is also explained, I forgot whether it's the 10th canto or in the 11th canto, in one of the purports, it is mentioned that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he mentions that it is only by the mercy of Sri Guru that a soul can gradually be taken from the understanding of Lord Krishna's expansions, and then only by the mercy of Sri Guru we can understand the position of Krishna and his pastimes. Otherwise, not possible. This is coming from our acharyas. We should not take these statements very lightly. So it is a gradual process. We have to be patient. And then in the 7th, 8th and 9th verses, Parikshit Maharaj asked questions about, please explain about the primary and secondary creation, how all the Purusha avatars of Lord Sri Krishna come into this creation, and how they start the primary creation, how Lord Brahma comes and helps with the secondary creation. All these questions are being asked. And then he glorifies again Sukadeva Goswami. You are learned in Vedic literatures, a self-realized and a great devotee of the Lord. Because you have mentioned that this subject matter is very difficult even for wise people to understand. Right? Sukadeva Goswami is asking Maharaj Parikshit, why are you asking me? Parikshit Maharaj is responding, because you are learned and you are self-realized and a great devotee of the Lord. Because you are expert in discerning the scriptural truths and have realized Krishna. Therefore, please clear my doubts. Tattvadarshinaha tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashrena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha tattvadarshi. We should inquire from a tattvadarshi who has realized the truth. And that knowledge that is coming through the line of disciplic succession is very potent, because it is as good as hearing from Lord Krishna when we hear from a realized devotee. And the Vedas, Prabhupada writes in the purport that the Vedas are very difficult to understand. We cannot understand just like some mundane way, some kind of scholarship, going into some university, studying Sanskrit. We cannot understand. Prabhupada quotes Brahma Samhita that Vedeshu Durlabha Adurlabha Matma Bhakto. To understand Vedas is Durlabha, but it is also Adurlabha. How? Atma Bhakto. In one of Prabhupada's classes of Brahma Samhita, Prabhupada cries when he mentions Adurlabha Matma Bhakto. He has so much attachment to his spiritual master. We just hope one day, 1 second, 1 moment we can develop such attachment to our Sri Guru. Prabhupada is in tears when he mentions Vedeshu Durlabha Adurlabha Matma Bhakto. But by the mercy of Sri Guru, that same Vedas which are very difficult to understand, we can understand by the mercy of Atma Bhakta, by a pure devotee of the Lord. Prabhupada was in tears and he was singing Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs that let me remain like a dog in front of my spiritual master. That was Prabhupada's mood for his Guru until he left his body. And this is the qualification of a Guru, Prabhupada says. A serious devotee must approach a spiritual master who not only is well versed in Vedic literatures, but is also a great devotee with factual realization of the Lord and his different energies. Doesn't mean that the Guru speaks only about Vrindavan pastimes. A Guru should have realization about Krishna, all the energies of Krishna, his expansions, everything. A Guru will be able to speak on the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam also, even if they may not have all the intricacies and all the technical terms and everything. Even if we give the most difficult verse of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is full of descriptions of the universe, they will be able to give their undivided realization about the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. That can be experienced when we hear from a realized devotee of the Lord. And then in the 11th verse onwards, now Srila Sukadeva Goswami is starting his prayers, the last set of verses. And Srila Sukadeva Goswami is offering prayers before answering Parikshit Maharaj. And this is what we all do when we repeat the words of our acharyas from Srimad Bhagavatam or Srimad Bhagavad Gita or Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Every devotee following the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada, we all offer prayers to our acharyas, to all the Vaishnavas, to ultimately to Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. And Prabhupada mentions in one of the purports in the set of prayers that Srila Sukadeva Goswami prays for the Lord's mercy so that he can repeat the same message coming down from disciplic succession. What happens when we offer prayers, when we offer Mangalacharan just before we started? We are invoking all the blessings from all the previous acharyas coming down the disciplic succession, right from Lord Shri Krishna, so that we remain as an instrument. In one of the verses, in one of the prayers, Srila Sukadeva Goswami prays Diyampati, who gives that intelligence for us to speak whatever we are speaking, whatever we are repeating. It is only by the mercy of our acharyas. Otherwise, why Srila Prabhupada should pray, cry, let me be a dog in the hands of my Guru? What is his mood? Meaning being an instrument in the hands of our acharyas, current as well as our predecessors. That is the mood of Srila Sukadeva Goswami. He is invoking blessings. He is not thinking, oh, I am such a realized devotee, I heard it from Srila Vyasadeva directly. Let me just start with the topic directly and address the questions quickly. Srila Sukadeva Goswami is teaching us we should always be in a prayerful mood whenever we are asked to repeat the words of our acharyas. And in the 11th verse, he starts to seek blessings from the Lord. And Prabhupada writes in the purport that devotees of the Lord, while delivering speeches describing the transcendental attributes of the Lord, do not think that they can do anything independently. What they can speak only what they are induced to speak by the Supreme Lord. Only Matta Smriti Jnanam Apohanam Cha. Only by the mercy of the Supreme Lord we are given remembrance to repeat from the words of our acharyas. So Srila Sukadeva Goswami first prays that he is praying to the Supreme Lord who accepts the three modes of creation, resides in all the jivas as Paramatma, whose ways are inconceivable. Achintya. The Supreme Lord is Achintya. He is inconceivable. With our mundane brains, we cannot understand. It is explained in one of the verses by Srila Sukadeva Goswami, even great personalities like Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva is not able to understand all the activities of the Supreme Lord. We see in many pastimes within the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam that we cannot understand the Supreme Lord. And in one of the purports, and in the 13th verse, it is mentioned by Srila Sukadeva Goswami that the Supreme Lord is complete, who is the complete form of existence, meaning he liberates the pious devotees, he destroys the advances of atheistic temperament in non-devotees who are not inclined towards Krishna consciousness, and he grants specific destinations to transcendentalists, meaning Paramahamsas, Paramahamsa devotees, unalloyed devotees of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada mentions that according to Srimati Kunti Devi, the Lord is factually understood by the Paramahamsas only, akinchana gocharam. And Prabhupada mentions that pure Bhakti Yoga is understood by the Paramahamsas. And Srimati Kunti Devi has especially mentioned that the Lord descends paritranaya sadhuna, especially to award Bhakti Yoga to the Paramahamsas. And Prabhupada defines what Paramahamsas means. We generally understand Paramahamsas means the 4 stages of sannyasa ashram. That's the general understanding, at least I had. But Prabhupada mentions that as well as he gives his own realization of who a Paramahamsa is. Paramahamsa ultimately means, in the true sense of the term, unalloyed devotees of the Lord. Doesn't mean that one has to for sure take sannyasa ashram and become a Paramahamsa. But Prabhupada is saying, being an unalloyed devotee of the Lord. There are so many unalloyed devotees of the Lord in the pages of Bhagavatam. They were not Paramahamsa sannyasis, but it is a matter of heart. Akinchana gocharam means that one should feel impoverished in heart. Janmaishwarya Shruta Shribir Edamana Madapuman. That verse, actual meaning in essence, meaning that we should be impoverished at heart. Maharaj Yudhishthira was the emperor of the world. Krishna made him the emperor of this world. But he was Akinchana Gochara. He was sold out to Krishna. Even though from an outwardly perspective, he had everything. And that is possible only by the association of Paramahamsa devotees who have reached that platform. At least we will get a glimpse of what it actually means to be unalloyed devotee. We are definitely not in that platform. At least I am not in that platform. But at least we will understand theoretically what it means to be Akinchana Gocharam. And then in the 14th verse, it is explained that Srila Sukadeva Goswami is glorifying the Lord, that he is the enjoyer of both the spiritual and the material worlds, and also possesses unsurpassable and unequal opulences. And the 15th verse is probably one of the highlighted verses in this section, where Srila Sukadeva Goswami glorifies the Supreme Lord in this wonderful prayer. Yat kirtanam yat smaranam yadikshanam yad bandhanam yad shravanam yadarhanam lokasya sadyo vidunoti kalmasham tasmai subhadra shravase namo namaha. Yat kirtanam yat smaranam yadikshanam. Whatever kirtanam we do, whether it is Leela Kirtan, Guna Kirtan, or Harinam Sankirtan, yet Smaranam, remembrance, yet Ikshanam, Yet Vandanam, prayers. I forgot what Ikshanam means. Ikshanam means audience. And yet Shravanam, hearing. Yet Arhanam, worship. Lokasya sadhyo vidinoti kalmasham. We have to glorify the Supreme Lord in all these processes of hearing and chanting and remembering. And even audience, Prabhupada says, even going to the temple and taking darshan of the deities is so purifying, according to the pages of Nectar of Devotion. It is also explained that when we go to the temple, when the pujaris offer arti to the deities, simply by looking at the arti is a purifying effect. Many of us don't even realize that. Prabhupada has given such a wonderful process. Even such neophytes like myself, simply going to the temple, we get purified unknowingly. Going and attending artis, darshan artis in the morning, right? We get purified. And Prabhupada mentions in this purport, even the very sound of the holy name of Lord Krishna or Lord Rama can at once surcharge the atmosphere spiritually. We must know definitely that the Lord is present wherever such pure transcendental service is performed, and thus the performer of the offenseless kirtanam has positive association with the Lord. This is very important. When we sit in kirtan at places wherever Sankirtan is happening, offenseless chanting has tremendous effect on the person's hearing also, ikshanam, on the audience also. We can actually have that effect when we realize that we are sitting in kirtan. We can actually have that feeling that this is offenseless. Sometimes even pure chanting, when pure devotees come and sit in kirtan, we can really see the effect. It won't be very high funda tunes going up and down, up and down, up and down. Simple kirtan. Prabhupada mentions when Prabhupada came to the West, he took all his devotees to downtown. And it is mentioned by some of his very early disciples that Prabhupada did 3 hours of kirtan with just one kartal, and it was not even a mridanga that time. And Prabhupada, it seems, defined kirtan that time. Prabhupada defined kirtan means chanting in a suitable tone where you can go on singing and glorifying the Supreme Lord's holy names. Go on, not getting exhausted. We see many kirtaniyas do that. They just close their eyes. They don't even open their eyes only. They are absorbed singing the glories of the Supreme Lord's holy names. We can really, many of us have that feeling when we sit in offenseless chanting kirtan, everyone gets purified. We don't want to feel like leaving that place only. And in that very same purport, Prabhupada also mentions that remembrance and prayers is also important in a devotee's life. And in 16, Prabhupada mentions that surrendering to the Lord relieves one of all present and future attachments. Prabhupada mentions that one who fully surrenders unto the Lord to render service on him out of spontaneous love for him factually assimilates the essence of all knowledge. So one must therefore adopt this simple way of devotional life of kirtanam, smaranam, ikshanam, etc. under the guidance of a spiritual master. And Prabhupada mentions one can in this way attain highest perfection in any category of human form of life in any part of the world. Any part of the world, we can attain highest perfection, Prabhupada writes. And then in the 17th verse, it is explained that in all auspicious, Krishna is all auspicious. People possessing any great quality, jnanis, karmis, yogis, scholars, cannot achieve any result without dedicating them to Lord Krishna's service. Right? Tapa, dana, whatever we may do, charity, anything, austerity, nothing is going to help us unless and until that is directed towards the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. Samsiddhir haritoshanam. There is no other way. And then in the 17th verse, Prabhupada mentions the purpose of maintaining the human body is different from that of the animals. Similarly, advancement of learning, economic development, philosophical research, and study in the Vedic literature should ultimately be done in relation to the Lord. So one may have various occupational duties, but it needs to end in relation to the Lord. And in the 18th verse, there's a very wonderful purport that Srila Prabhupada writes that the Supreme Lord is the shelter of his devotees. He purifies any sinful person. And who are those sinful people? Kirata, Hunandara, Pulinda, Pulkasha, Abira, Suva, Yavana, Kashadaya. All these different kinds of people whom we haven't even heard. That's what we think. But Prabhupada writes, who are these people? Prabhupada writes, who are these people and which part of the world they are from? One example, Prabhupada, I can just read out one example. It's just a brilliant purport. Prabhupada writes, Yavana was the name of one of the sons of Maharaj Yayati. And therefore, currently they are in the world known as Turkey. They are the Yavanas. And Prabhupada mentions in many of these category of people that are there around the world, they were actually having some Brahmanical culture. But over the period of time, the Brahmanical culture has declined and they have come to a level of Mlecha or Yavana. And sometimes we may think that, oh, at least I'm safe, I'm fine. I'm not living in a place where Yavanas or Mlechas are there. But in another purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada mentions, or I forgot it's Srimad Bhagavatam or Chaitanya Charitamrita, that if one doesn't rise up early in the morning to glorify Krishna, performing Aarti, chanting the holy names of the Lord, reading Srimad Bhagavatam in the morning, is also Mlecha. This is mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in one of the purports. It was very startling to hear this, that Prabhupada really wants us to become serious in Krishna consciousness and never take things lightly. Bhakti is very simple. And in this purport, Prabhupada writes that any person, from any part of the world can be purified by a Shuddha pure Vaishnava. A Vaishnava is so powerful enough to turn any person into a Vaishnava, even if he or she is in one of these categories of people who are very much degraded, according to the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. And only qualification is that one should take shelter of a pure devotee of the Lord. And who is that? Who is a pure devotee? Prabhupada mentions a pure devotee of the Lord who is knowledgeable in the transcendental science of Krishna. Prabhupada mentions in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nyasi Shudra Kinana Ye Krishna Tattva Veta Se Guru Hai. Prabhupada mentions this in Bhagavad Gita, that one who knows the science and essence of Krishna consciousness, he can become a guru. Doesn't matter whether he is in one of these categories of these people. If he has taken shelter of a pure devotee, he is qualified to become a guru. We can see the glorious disciples of Srila Prabhupada. So many of Srila Prabhupada disciples are pure devotees of the Lord. When we hear them, we will really understand who they truly are, how much mercy they have obtained from Srila Prabhupada. Anyone from any part of the world who becomes well conversant in the science of Krishna consciousness becomes a pure devotee and a spiritual master for general mass of people, and they may reclaim them by purification of the heart. See, these are Prabhupada's statements 5 decades ago, and Prabhupada has actually seen this. He has seen the future, what is going to happen, and his disciples are delivering the general mass of the people, fallen people like myself, through many of his disciples. They are delivering the whole world today. Right? A Vaishnava therefore can accept the bona fide spiritual master from any part of the world without any consideration of caste and creed, and promote him by regulative principles to the status of a pure Vaishnava. From any part of the world, we can accept a bona fide spiritual master. I was hearing a class of a great saint. He was mentioning there is this general misunderstanding that oh, after Srila Prabhupada left, there is no bona fide guru around. The other day I was hearing a class by His Holiness Sri Vikram Swami Maharaj, a dear friend of mine. He forwarded that class, and His Holiness Sri Vikram Swami Maharaj, he was mentioning a class in Pune. He was mentioning that we have never heard in the history of Vaishnava Sampradayas that one Sampradaya Acharya is going to take charge of all the future disciples for next 10,000 years. It has never happened. It will never will happen also. But here Prabhupada is clearly saying, can accept a bona fide spiritual master from any part of the world. This saint was mentioning, I'm quoting from Mahabharata, another saint, Prabhupada's disciple. He was mentioning that in Mahabharata, Lord Krishna himself mentions that we can find so many pure devotees, Mahabharata devotees in this world, but it is very difficult to find one disciple. I'm repeating. We can find so many Mahabharata devotees, pure Vaishnavas, whom we can revere or pray to have them as our spiritual masters. But it is very hard to find one disciple. Meaning, Prabhupada and their acharyas, they often quote this. Disciple means discipline. It's very difficult to find an ideal disciple who's sold out to his guru. Struggling. I'm still struggling. Practicing devotees. That's what Prabhupada says. We can be promoted by regulative principles. That is the only way. We cannot directly jump towards Raganuga Bhakti. Only by regulative principles, a bona fide spiritual master knows how to train up a devotee to ultimately bring them up to the platform of an ideal disciple. And then the 19th verse, running short of time. He is continuing to glorify the Supreme Lord. He is the Super Soul and Supreme Lord of all self-realized souls, personification of the Vedas, religious scriptures and austerities, worshipped by Brahma, Shiva, and those who are above pretensions. And in the 20th verse, Srila Sukadeva Goswami, he glorifies the Supreme Lord. He is Shriyapatir, Yajnapatir, Prajapatir, Diyampatir, Lokapatir, Darapatir. He is the master of all the opulences, Yajnapatir, of all the sacrifices, Prajapatir, of all the living entities, Diyampatir, we discussed, of all the intelligences. Prabhupada mentions in the purport that intelligence to a devotee is gradual. I may have had a certain understanding of Krishna consciousness maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but then gradually, by the mercy of pure devotees and the Supreme Lord, the intelligence is gradually evolving. So that's Diyampatir. That's by the mercy of the Lord. Prabhupada mentions in the purport of the first canto that it is not, Krishna consciousness is not a mechanical process. Oh, I will do this, I will get this. I will do this, I will get this. Prabhupada mentions that it is not a mechanical process. It is ultimately the mercy of the Lord. So it is an it is a descending process, not an ascending process. And then in text 21, it is explained that the Supreme Lord is the master of, giver of liberation. And then it is all, Srila Sukadeva Goswami also mentions, by thinking of the Supreme Lord's lotus feet at every second, following in the footsteps of the previous authorities or acharyas, the devotee ultimately comes in trance and can see the Supreme Absolute Truth. And Prabhupada writes that a pure devotee never thinks himself to be very great. He always thinks himself fallen into the ocean of birth and death and incessantly prays to the Lord to lift him up, just like Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prays in the Shikshashtakam prayers. Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitam mam vishame bhavam budau kripaya tavapada pankaja stitaduli sadrisham vichinkaya. Then the pure devotee, however, by following the ways of previous acharyas or authorities, can see the Supreme Lord through the transparent via medium of the bona fide spiritual master. Premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena. Unless and until we smear our eyes with love that we don't have, at least I don't have. But Prabhupada gives the trick by the transparent via medium of the Supreme, by the bona fide spiritual master. We can perceive the Supreme Lord. We can see the Supreme Lord by their mercy. So that is what is actually meant by following the previous authorities that Srila Sukadeva Goswami is mentioning, the acharyas. And then in text 22, Srila Sukadeva Goswami mentions that Brahma actually got inspired from the Supreme Lord, and he was helpful in the Supreme Lord in performing the secondary creation, because the Supreme Lord already arranged all the ingredients for Lord Brahma, and he inspired him through his heart, and Lord Brahma actually helped him in creation. And then Prabhupada writes in that purport, again and again I'm mentioning, Prabhupada's every single line is so illuminating. He says the physicist can deal only with the prakrita sound, or the sound that is there in the material sky or in this material world. Therefore, we must know that the Vedic sounds recorded in symbolic expression cannot be understood by anyone within this universe, unless and until one is inspired by the vibration of the natural aprakrita sound. So therefore, this aprakrita sound of the Vedic hymns or the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra or any other hymns that are being chanted has to descend in the chain of disciplic succession. No mundane scholar can translate or reveal the true import of the Vedic mantras or hymns. So that is the reason why Srila Prabhupada actually, following the footsteps of the acharyas, introduced this Diksha initiation process. We must receive the mantra from a bona fide spiritual master. These are the words of Srila Prabhupada here. We cannot bypass these statements. Prabhupada is saying no mundane scholar can translate or reveal the true import of the Vedic hymns or the Vedic mantras, which includes the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. We cannot understand, or the truth will not be revealed to us. The mantra has to come from the bona fide disciplic succession, not just the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Any bona fide mantra in one of the four sampradayas have to be received from the disciplic succession. So unless one receives the transcendental knowledge from an authorized parampara, one should be considered useless, even though one may be greatly qualified in mundane advancements. These are the words of Srila Prabhupada. And then in text 23, Srila Sukadeva Goswami continues to glorify in his final glorification that the Supreme Lord is the cause. He causes the living entities to be subjected to the 16 divisions of the modes. We are all trapped within the 16 material elements of the Supreme Lord because we wanted to enjoy. So the Supreme Lord has made beautiful arrangement, and all these 16 elements are ultimately the energy of the Supreme Lord, and the individual living entity can only pray to understand it properly. And then in text 24 and 25, he offers his final obeisances to his father and guru, Srila Vyasadeva, and the Supreme Lord, from whom all the nectarian words, transcendental knowledge in the form of transcendental knowledge, drop from the lotus-like mouth of the Lord. I don't want to go into the purport of that verse, but finally, in text 25, Srila Sukadeva Goswami mentions that I will answer your questions by quoting. So he's mentioning to Parikshit Maharaj that I will answer your questions by quoting Lord Brahma and Lord Sripad Narada Muni's interaction on the same thing. I'll stop here. I'm extremely sorry I went a few minutes over. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Vamsi Vadana Prabhu. What a beautiful class. Very, very powerful. And I really thoroughly enjoyed the way you were analyzing the purports. You brought out such key points in the purports. So thank you so much for your association and making this very wonderful presentation. Very grateful.
Thank you, Mother. Hare Krishna.
Beautiful. Yeah. Dear devotees, we open the forum for question and answers. If you have any questions or comments for Prabhuji, please feel free to ask. Would anyone like to ask any questions? Or you can even share your reflections. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Prabhu, once again. Looks like everyone on the forum is convinced there are no questions.
Prabhuji,
We are more
Dandavata
confused,
Pranamatu.
Mataji. Hare Krishna.
What is it?
Thank you so much for such a beautiful, beautiful class, Prabhu. Very grateful to you. Hari Bol.
Thank you, Mataji, for the encouragement. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So thank you all again, devotees. We request everyone to please continue joining us in this entire series. Thank you for your participation, and thank you again, Prabhuji, for all the effort that you have taken to give such a nice, detailed presentation, analyzing each and every purport that is so relevant. Thank you again. I really liked one thing that was, Prabhupada made it very clear that any bona fide representative of the Guru Parampara can initiate. You brought it out very nicely. The way you analyzed the whole thing, I really liked it. So thank you for doing that. It
Thank
was
you,
very
Mataji.
interesting. Yeah, the way Prabhupada also.
Yeah, Prabhupada's purport, every line is so
Every
unique.
line is so beautiful. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Wonderful class.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. We'll end the call here to devotees, so please continue to join us on this series. Hare Krishna. Thank you,
Hare
Vamsi.
Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
Hear
Hare
more
Krishna.
from you in the coming sessions. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Ending the call here. We need